We have a discussion panel, and I will introduce Dina. Dina will be moderating this session.
Thank you very much. All right, so I would like to invite our esteemed panelists who are experts in data and insurance. Renee Davis is an SVP and Chief Actuary of Bond and Specialty in Insurance for Travelers. We also have Bernard Gilden, who is a VP and Actuary, Head of Global Claims and Analytics and Excel. Matt Heaphy, who is our Head in Life Annuity Pricing at Nassau, and of course Kamron Khodjaev, who is Strategic Advisor at Propel IT. So what I'm going to do is to switch to a different mic and give that mic.
So when we look at data insurance, and when we look at data in general, 90% of data that exists in the world was generated in the past couple of years. So if you think about it, it's kind of really startling statistics. And only 0.5% of that is being analyzed. So it is also quite startling. So the first question I have for you guys is that, what is your advice for dealing with data delusion?
Hi everyone, we didn't fully introduce ourselves. And I'll maybe save that for later, but I would say that given the amount of information that's out there, not all of it is going to be successfully used, or maybe is not as valuable as you'd like it to be. So the real point is make sure that you're finding information that is efficient and cost effective in terms of making use of it, but also you have a clear understanding of its potential value. Making sure that you're not getting data for the sake of getting data. Make sure you're getting data that's going to help you make business decisions and gain insights.
Okay, Bernard, so maybe you can introduce yourself now since you
Thank you. Yeah, so Bernard Gilden, I am Vice President and Head of Global Claim Analytics at XXL. XXL is a newly minted division of the AXA Group after we were acquired. XL Catlin was acquired by the AXA Group. We focus on very large global risks and also complex specialty exposures otherwise. My group and our responsibility and our role is to make use of data, technology, and analytics to improve the performance of the claim operations, to deliver superior customer service, and then also to be able to provide insights to our business partners outside of claim. I'm a native of the area. I've had an opportunity to work with several different companies here in Hartford and see the evolution of how the insurance industry, P&C in particular, has developed over the years and evolved. And as we've noted with some of the conversations here, insurance has evolved recently rather slowly, but we're at a really important flashpoint, I think, a transition point where that evolution is likely to accelerate very quickly. It's a snowballing effect. You start getting the use of information and technology, and that kind of builds on itself very quickly. And I think we're in a really good space for that. So it's great to be here with you all.
Thank you. Renee, maybe you can introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Renee Davis. I'm a Chief Actuary of Bond and Specialty at the Travelers Company. I've been in the insurance industry for 30 years. About a little over half of that has been in specialty lines. It seems to be where I keep navigating to. And even though my title's Chief Actuary, I have the actuaries, I have the data scientists in my group, I have the data engineers, I have the advanced analytics group as well. And I'm happy to be here.
Great, thank you. We'll pass the mic.
Hi guys, Matt Heaphy from Nassau. I'm in charge of life and annuity pricing at my company. Been with Nassau for about 12 years now. So in my area, we're responsible for product design, competitive analysis, of course, pricing, rate setting, and all things product implementation. So we work with work with our legal folks for creating contracts, we work with marketing, we pretty much touch the entire business in what I do. So it's a pretty exciting and dynamic role because you get to be a jack of all trades. In terms of data and analytics, we're heavy users of data, whether it comes from getting competitive data or just experience or actuarial experience that we've collected over the years in terms of policyholder behavior, mortality, lapse rates, that kind of thing. And also really happy to be here. Folks that work with me know that I'm extremely passionate about all things data science and analytics. Big proponent of predictive modeling and data visualization, so a lot of this stuff really gets me going. So again, really happy to be part of this panel.
Hello everyone, my name is Kamron and I work with Propel on partnerships and sales, and I joined the company from its investor, so I worked for the venture capital fund. So we looked in a lot of data companies in healthcare, life sciences, as well as productivity. And getting back to the question, when we looked at these companies, they all collected some sort of data. So our question was how actionable it is and what's ROI that it delivers to a company. And recently we got really interested in InsurTech. That's why we made a couple investments, and we're still looking to make more investments into the space due to the mass amount of data being generated. And we specifically use different metrics such as minimum 3x ROI on that data that delivers for the insurance company.
Any words on the solution?
Yeah, I think I would probably echo some of Bernard's comments. There's certainly a lot of data out there in the world, and I think it's really important to make sure that you're making wise decisions in terms of what you should collect, and even with information that you do collect, given that we work in a pretty regulated industry, we also sometimes have to ask ourselves, and maybe this is something that is pretty specific to life insurance, should we use this data that we collect to make certain decisions? So that's something that certainly comes up with us.
Thank you. So despite the starting stats on how much data we're getting every day and it's growing exponentially, I often hear from insurance professionals, we don't get enough data. This is the common sentiment, and I'm sometimes wondering why we get that sentiment. Are we getting the wrong data? Or does it have to do with our ability to harness it somehow? So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is a great question for me in particular because in the life space, we take very long-term, long-tailed risks. So even though there's been a plethora of data that's been generated over the last few years, a lot of times when I'm looking at pricing a product, I want data that goes back, 10 years or so, because I'm looking at events that are critically important 5, 10, sometimes 15 years down the road. So sometimes that's not exactly available, at least in terms of our own company history. So for us, it's important to try to work with external sources of data, maybe working with vendors that collect experience from other companies to just sort of leverage that predictive power that we could get from combining our data with more credible data sources that are out there.
Renee wanted just something to say.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think some of that sentiment comes from not only not enough data, but also the quality. Is the quality there that it can be used? And in a large company with a lot of legacy systems, I loved how Nate talked about that earlier. We haven't always been. It hasn't always been at the forefront of the data collection. So this is just the internal process. Forget the new data that's out there with third-party data. That's going to add a whole nother complexity. But when you hear the analytics people who are dealing with the internal data, it may be more about have we always captured it up front? Have we always, is there always quality around that data? Are we capturing it, and then are we able to harness it? I remember an example once where we identified all this new data we wanted to collect with a new system we were building, and then 6 months later we're ready to go look at that data, and our partners said, "Oh, we didn't know you wanted to look at that data." So now we had to do a whole nother project to just harness the data that we actually had. So I think we're getting smarter about that. I think, we're working closer with our software developers, our IT partners to say, okay, data is part and not after an afterthought. It's part of the process.
Are there any approaches that you find particularly attractive on harnessing the data, for instance, open source data type of work?
Well, one of the things, and it dovetails the last question about harnessing the data. If you're using third-party data, kind of the historical way to the historical way to do that was you got to bring that data in-house. Then you got to match to your policy records or your claim records to really make that connection and build some analytics that adds that data to decide if it has predictive power. What we're exploring now is not bringing it in-house, not housing it, either accessing it through either a cloud service or a data as a service model where we're calling out to different third-party vendors real time in the process, which does change the dynamic. You're no longer having to do this match, and the speed of that is very, very different.
It's a great question for commercial auto insurance, by the way, because a lot of data nationwide is available in every state's DOT, and it's very unstructured. So getting that data structured is really painful, and very few vendors do that. So FMCSA actually took a lead on it, and they're trying to structure it. They have an agenda to unify that data by 2021, I think. So we have some time. But a lot of good information is not readily available for insurance companies to drive their decisions to improve their loss ratio, right, and reduce risks on the roads. We work with dozens of partners to structure it internally.
Yeah. So you mentioned the commercial. Are there any other lines that are going to benefit tremendously from third-party data?
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of vetting that third-party data, a lot of commercial auto insurance companies have to actually specify what they're looking for, and that data has to deliver 3x ROI to be successful.
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, just something I've noticed with third-party open source data sets. I mean, there's been a bit of a proliferation in really high-quality APIs that have been generated over the last few years. So, if I look at something like financial data, I tend to use a few open source API packages that are linked into an R environment to pull in things like interest rates or certain stock market indices. Also, if you want to look up things like demographic data, the United States Census and the Bureau of Labor Statistics also have really high quality APIs if you want to slice it, grab some geographic data and slice and dice that a number of different ways.
Right. So, yes, we got all that third-party data, but that third-party data is also at so much granularity about all sorts of risks that we're encountering. And my understanding is that we get so granular that sometimes we can really identify and pinpoint those risks and put certain individuals or consumer groups at the disadvantage. So my question is more about the sort of getting to the regulatory part of using data. What do you think about how it impacts the way regulators communicate with insurance companies and where the problems may occur when it comes to getting really granular on certain risks?
So I'll let some of the pricing folks speak to that side of the equation, but maybe one starting point to think about, and this is something that happens or is a big impact when you're talking about some of the global markets, particularly European markets, but data privacy is a huge issue. and you may be collecting data in a way that you think that is not going against regulations, only to find out that you are. Who's able to see it within your organization? Is it role-based delivery or things along those lines? So you bump into a lot of regulatory issues as you're trying to make that data very available to a lot of different people, or they can access it easily. That becomes a challenge. There's different questions or different issues when you talk about how you use it for pricing and underwriting.
Yeah, maybe just from a pricing standpoint and underwriting standpoint, one thing I would point out there, we've seen a lot of really high quality predictive data sets that are out there on mortality that are hitting things like prescription drug databases or other electronic health records and a number of other data sources. And some of the regulatory response, at least that has preliminarily come up about these new tools, has been overall pretty encouraging, sort of pro-innovation. They're interested in companies utilizing better data sources to make smarter decisions. But at the in the same breath, they're also concerned about whether or not carriers who are using these data sets are truly understand the underlying algorithms, and they want companies to be 100% certain that the algorithms are not, let's say, selecting against protected classes in an unfair way, which would just be anathema to the goals of the business environment that we're trying to operate in. So I think maybe this is probably personal opinion, not necessarily my employers that I'm spotting off here, but I think we need to be careful when you are using new data sets or maybe new models that are fit to new data sets that you don't necessarily understand. It helps to take maybe look at it with a little bit of skepticism and make sure you truly understand why certain algorithms are making the decisions that they're making, because ultimately you're going to be responsible for those decisions.
Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, certainly it's the same in the personal insurance space. And of course, it's, as we all know, it will be different for every state because regulators will react differently. Some will be more open, but certainly anywhere where you have a machine learning algorithm where the algorithm is actually changing, right? I think to your point, then it hasn't right now. I would say passed the regulatory hurdle because we can't say for certain what variables and what the algorithm is using. So, we then decide to build models or use predictive analytics with factors that are allowed by the regulator. So that's where we are today.
Thank you. So before I go to my question to the audience, do you have any questions? Because I'd like to make sure that your present questions are answered. Let me get
Hi. So I've heard the phrase predict and prevent recently, and so we're talking a lot about predictive analytics. I'm more interested in the preventing, and I'm wondering if from your seats, if the data is suggesting that the prevention of losses is a lucrative endeavor for the insurance companies. So thinking of it from the personal line standpoint, homeowners insurance, does it make sense for the insurance company to pay to install an automatic water shutoff valve for their new insured to prevent a water loss? And will they ultimately decide to do that, to give them this device as part of their insurance policy that will bring down the cost, and then install it for them?
Yeah, so certainly we're at the heels of that, right? I mean, we are piloting things like that in our world, and your last point is interesting because even if you've supplied the device, they don't always turn it on. So, which we have found. So you have to actually go install it, right? So we don't know. For us, we don't know the direct answer to your question, is it worth it? Okay, but we do think that risk is going to change, and with smart home devices, with driverless car, whatever the new technology will bring to us, it will change the risk that we're insuring. So we not only have to think about the changing risk, but we also need to be part of the solution, right? And improving and from the work they're doing with the fleets here, right? With Kamron's company is doing exactly that, right? Trying to look at reducing the risk, and I think that's going to be huge. I think we have a lot of data to allow that to happen across many lines of business, and not just personal insurance.
I was just going to add to that. A lot of times it's not a financial equation alone. So, the insurance industry oftentimes is not a trusted partner, let's say. And a lot of companies are going to look for ways to build that relationship with their insureds, whether it's personal lines, commercial, and so on, and truly become a partner with that entity, build that trust, be able to have that customer for a long period of time. And doing some of the things like you were talking about certainly offers an opportunity to say, I'll charge you less if you have this particular device or whatever, but it also shows that the company's caring about them more than just strictly the bottom line.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions from the audience?
Hello. So I work for Verisk ISO, and I work for a business unit, a part of that supports property casualty insurance. I was curious because I work with carriers all over the country to get your opinion on modeled data versus reported data. I hear a lot of very strong opinions from carriers on both sides and where they feel they can make business decisions if the data source is a modeled data source or if it's actual reported data. So do you guys have any opinions, because you all use a lot of different data in your jobs, on where you would make decisions with a modeled data source versus a reported actual data set?
So when you say reported, you mean like financial reported data?
Let's say like insured reported information straight from
Yeah.
DOI, for example, that
Right.
experience data versus a model built off of experience data.
Yeah. So when I think of reported data, my brain goes to some financial reported. We're reporting to an entity, an external entity, and to me that creates a level of governance that's a pretty high bar. Maybe. I assume most companies feel like they should be reporting accurate data to their regulators or their insurance, commissioner. When I think about model data, I like it to be complete and accurate, but we also have a little bit more leeway because we have the luxury to say, is 80/20 okay, meaning I don't have all the data, but I could still make informed decisions from the data that I have. And I don't think it should carry the same hurdle, if that's kind of the question you're asking. I think we have to sort of understand the limitations when we don't have all the data, but it would be a high hurdle if we said we had to have complete and accurate data to make any business decision. And by the way, we've always done that with data. It's just now called model data, but Claire, I think it was from MicroStrategy, said you make decisions on your gut, right? We've always done that. So.
So I was trying to think about the context as well, and I guess the thing that I would characterize some of that, the two have to augment each other for sure, and maybe reported data is something that's more of factual on the accounting side of it, whatever you want to call it, where you know what your results are, whereas the model data is focusing more on some predictive elements, what is likely to happen, and that's equally important, especially when you're making business decisions. But you need both ends. How have you performed up to this point? Where do you think that you're going? How do you make decisions about what your strategy is? What is your vision? Where do you want to go with your business? I think the model data helps inform that, but you in the ideal world, you're using both.
maybe the one thing I would add, I mean, at the end of the day, model data is really just a transformation that's applied to our reported data or historical experience data. The models that we're using in the first place exist because they were originally calibrated to some other data set. So, and again, like you kind of need both of them to make any decision. So.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? If not, then I'll go to mine. So historically, insurance companies relied on structured data, and we just heard some sentiment comment from Kamron saying that they're taking unstructured data. But there is much more to unstructured data. It's not just whatever we're buying from different sources that don't match. There are pictures, there are videos, there are texts. Social media exploded with a lot of data. Have you seen a real shift in harnessing that unstructured data in your day-to-day life?
Well, certainly I would say without a doubt, unstructured data is kind of like the new frontier in many ways. There's an awful lot of it out there, and how do you make use of it to gain a competitive advantage, gain better insights is all really important. One aspect of that, though, that I would put out there is when you think about an operation and how it functions and the work that people are doing through their process, there are certain things you can do with unstructured data to take steps out of the process and get better information as a result. An example would be you have, on the underwriting side, for example, you've got class codes and things like that, which are, I can select a particular class code for this particular business based on my judgment, and that's it. And I have maybe 10 to pick from or something like that, or maybe thousands as it might be. And the same is true with a code related to the cause of loss on a claim. But if you have unstructured data that you can use and the machine learning around it that kind of builds that code on the fly, now you've got much better information about that, much more granular, and allows you to also maybe not have the people who are making those calls on that coding, it takes it out of their hands. Obviously, you still want some reviews of that or whatever else, but you have an ability to streamline a process. You don't have to have them enter information. That information can be generated through some of what they're otherwise taking as information in notes from an underwriting perspective or documents that are being captured as part of the claim process.
So I would just add to that, what Bernard, you talked about is existing, changing the existing process, right? Using the same data but getting at it at a different way, right? And then the other side of that is new data, right? New information, totally new. And image, the image analytics and the explosion of image for both on the underwriting side and on the claim side. First and foremost on the underwriting side, trying to get better visual of the risks we're insuring through not our own images but third-party data, and that has changed because we've never had that before. We've had static information about a location, but we've never had the actual visual while during the underwriting process.
I totally agree with that. And in the auto space, the car itself collects so much data, and it's all unstructured. For example, it is important to pay attention for the data collection tool. Also, like video camera, the dash camera in the cars. They collect a lot of data, but what do you do with it, and what's the strength of computer vision and machine learning software that generates the actionable items is also important. So there's definitely an explosion, and it's what you do with the data rather than getting the data.
And on that note, I'd like to ask the last question, because yes, it's very expensive to analyze that data, especially in videos. And when we look at data analytics and data analytics services, in the past year, the revenue for data analytics services grew almost fivefold. Just think about it, fivefold. So what's your advice on anything that making sure that the benefits of getting that data actually outweigh the cost that you have to pay for all that wonderful data that may be available at your fingertips?
I would probably say just out of the gate, a lot of this, I think, making the right decisions about how to use data really starts with the people and having a data literate culture. It helps to have employees on your team who really understand how to use data, because I think they can, your own employees who know the business could be in the best position to help select the right partners and tools that should be tackled for a potential use case down the road.
I think I like the words you used. I think identifying those use cases, and for the data and analytics folks that are sitting here, right? Like that's how we think when we here in our own world, we're building predictive models. We think about the data that's going into it. But I would also then encourage, making sure you have a seat at the table with business partners, because they're trying to solve business problems too, and they're not always thinking that it's a data and analytics problem, or that there's a third-party data source that can take them out of the process of inputting, right? They're not always thinking that, because they don't have as much a visual of what's out there. And if we think we can't see what's out there because of the proliferation, they definitely can't see what's out there. So, having a seat at the table and challenging, all business processes have a data and analytics component.
Yeah, I would add to that. So that's kind of at the end of the business customer using that information, and that's really important. And I think at the other end of it, maybe at sort of the information technology level, making sure that the organization is thinking ahead about what data needs are there, what kind of ecosystem are you going to have that can connect a bunch of different information together in a new way than in ways that you've never even dreamed about before, but having that flexibility, something that can scale up. As maybe a quick analogy, if you think about I'm kind of a car guy, right? So the muscle cars that were around in the late 60s were fantastic, but particularly in going in a straight line. If you want to drive really fast around curves and stuff like that, that's not the car you were going to drive. But in today's world, the cars that are being built with tremendous amount of horsepower have phenomenal technology in them, including things like magnetics in their suspension that react in a flash of a second to the road conditions and keep the tires on the road and all that stuff, not to mention all the safety. But that's the car you want to drive now as you're going into trying to drive faster, having higher horsepower, whatever else. So the same things from a data and analytics perspective. You got to build the foundation for what it is you're trying to get to, and make sure that infrastructure of the data is something that can move along with you, maybe even get ahead of you, and then you can build from there.
Any other thoughts?
I'd just say, don't miss the party. It's going to be great.
Great. Well, let's give a round of applause for our panel.
Thanks, Dina. Actually, I'm going to ask the panelists to stay up here. Speakers, if you want to pop up.